They laughed at his crazy invention, but when it sold for billions, he bought their company just to fire them all. The polished oak table of the Innovara Tech boardroom gleamed under the opulent chandeliers, reflecting not just the soft glow of success, but the taut, nervous energy that hummed through the air like a barely contained current. Every surface, from the rich, dark wood to the crystal water goblets, seemed to amplify the unspoken tension. Cashin Blackwood, a man whose tailored suit seemed an extension of his own self-importance, leaned back in his ergonomic chair, a smug smile playing on his lips, a silent promise of an even grander victory. His gaze drifted to the framed corporate awards lining the wall, each a testament, in his mind, to his own cunning, not the original vision. Genevieve Sterling, her sharp eyes scanning the room as if searching for hidden profits in the very dust motes, adjusted her designer glasses, a flicker of triumph, cold and calculating, in her gaze. She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on her tablet, its screen displaying figures that would undoubtedly mean significant bonuses for her and her cohort. Bartholomew Finch, perpetually sneering, polished the rim of his spectacles with a silk handkerchief, his posture radiating intellectual superiority, as if the very air he breathed was purer than that of lesser minds. They were awaiting the finalization of the deal, the last, crucial step in their meticulously crafted scheme to reshape Innovara Tech into a lean, profit-driven machine, shedding the dead weight of its eccentric founder's original vision, a vision they now openly scorned. The old ways, the old ideals, were about to be buried under a mountain of quarterly earnings reports. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors, usually guarded by a phalanx of silent, uniformed security, swung open without warning, a jarring creak echoing in the hushed chamber. All heads snapped towards the entrance, surprise morphing quickly into annoyance. Standing in the doorway, framed by the hushed anticipation of the moment, was a figure they vaguely recognized, yet could not quite place. There was something familiar in the silver gleam of his neatly combed hair, the erectness of his posture, the understated elegance of his suit that spoke of quiet, generational wealth. Yet, his presence there, unannounced and uninvited, defied all logic. Behind him, two stern-faced lawyers, briefcases clutched firmly, stood like silent, unyielding sentinels, their very stillness adding to the room's growing disquiet. Cashin, his brow furrowing with a mixture of confusion and irritation, was the first to speak, his voice laced with the condescension he reserved for perceived inferiors. "Excuse me, sir, this is a private board meeting. Who are you, and how did you get in here?" He looked pointedly towards the security monitor in the corner, a flicker of irritation crossing his face as he saw no immediate response, no guard rushing to apprehend the intruder. This lapse in his carefully controlled environment was almost as unsettling as the man himself. The man in the doorway stepped forward, his eyes, sharp and knowing, sweeping over each executive like a seasoned predator sizing up its prey. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips, a smile that held the weight of untold stories, of long-nursed grievances, and a quiet, simmering vengeance. The room, which had moments ago buzzed with their self-congratulatory chatter, fell into an unnerving silence, thick and heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Private meeting, indeed, Cashin, the man's voice was calm, yet resonated with an authority that made the very air in the room thicken. It was a voice that carried the quiet hum of power, a voice that, despite its current composed delivery, hinted at depths of cunning and resolve, a quiet warning they were too arrogant to heed. "But then, this is my meeting now. And the game, as they say, is over." Genevieve Sterling scoffed, a dismissive flick of her wrist accompanying her words, her sharp, calculating mind already dismissing him as a deluded eccentric. "Your meeting? Please. Are you here to audition for our new janitorial staff? Because I believe Arthur Pendleton already filled that role. An old man, just like you, who probably got lost on his way to the broom closet." Her words were delivered with a cold, calculating sarcasm, designed to belittle and dismiss, as was her custom. Bartholomew Finch let out a snickering laugh, covering his mouth with a hand, his eyes glinting with amusement at the thought of this uninvited peasant interrupting their moment of triumph. Cashin merely folded his arms, an arrogant smirk twisting his lips, confident in his position, utterly oblivious to the seismic shift that was about to occur. He saw only a confused old man, a nuisance to be brushed aside. They saw an old man, perhaps a trespasser, certainly a fool. What they failed to see, blinded by their own towering egos and rapacious greed, was the legendary mind of Silas the sage, Thorn, the very founder they had cast aside, now returned to reclaim what was rightfully his, and to administer a justice as precise as it was devastating. The grand reveal was upon them, but they, in their blissful ignorance, continued to mock the architect of their own impending downfall. The irony was so profound, it almost made Silas chuckle aloud. Almost. He held it, savoring the moment, the bitter taste of their arrogance mixing with the sweet anticipation of their impending reckoning. Silas Thorn was not merely a name, he was a legend, a titan of innovation whose vision had birthed Innovara Tech from a cramped garage startup into a sprawling global powerhouse. In those early days, the scent of solder and ambition filled the air, the nights blurring into days fueled by cheap coffee and audacious dreams. His mind, a veritable labyrinth of audacious ideas, had consistently pushed boundaries, creating devices that once seemed relegated to the realm of science fiction, from the first consumer-grade quantum processors to bioengineered filtration systems that purified water in drought-stricken regions. For decades, his unconventional brilliance had fueled the company's relentless pursuit of groundbreaking technology, always prioritizing progress over mere profit. He was Silas the Sage, a moniker earned through a lifetime of wisdom and foresight, a leader who walked the factory floors, knew his engineers by name, and celebrated every small breakthrough as a victory for humanity. He believed in the inherent good of technology, its power to elevate, to connect, to solve the world's most pressing problems. Yet, even legends can be betrayed from within. As Silas aged, the wolves began to circle, their shadows lengthening across the vibrant landscape he had cultivated. Cashin Blackwood, his hand-picked CEO, a man Silas had foolishly believed shared his foundational values, slowly began to corrode the company's soul. Cashin had initially seemed promising, smooth, charismatic, outwardly aligned with Innovara Tech's ethos. But beneath the polished veneer, he harbored a rapacious ambition, seeing Innovara Tech not as a beacon of innovation, but as a vessel for his own enrichment. He spoke of streamlining, of optimizing, words that were mere euphemisms for cutting corners, downsizing, and sacrificing long-term vision for immediate, inflated gains. He cultivated an inner circle, subtly isolating Silas, making decisions behind closed doors, always with an eye on the next quarterly report, never on the next generation. Genevieve Sterling, the CFO, was his financial enforcer, a woman whose spreadsheets were colder than winter ice, and whose gaze could freeze ambition in its tracks. She viewed every project through the narrowest lens of immediate return, dismissing anything that did not promise an instant surge in quarterly earnings. To her, Silas's grand ideas were not visions, they were financial liabilities, unviable, too risky, or simply fanciful delusions that bled the company's bottom line. She systematically dismantled employee benefits, outsourced essential departments, and squeezed every last penny from supply chains, all under the guise of fiscal responsibility. And then there was Bartholomew Finch, the R&D manager, a man consumed by intellectual snobbery and a deep-seated insecurity. He saw Silas's age as a sign of mental decline, viewing himself as the true torchbearer of innovation, despite lacking an ounce of Silas's original genius. Bartholomew reveled in belittling Silas's later projects, spreading insidious rumors about the founder's supposed senility, subtly undermining his authority at every turn. He thrived on tearing down the truly revolutionary to elevate his own, often mediocre, concepts. He would grandstand in meetings, using overly complex jargon to obscure the banality of his own ideas, while dismissing genuine breakthroughs as primitive or unscientific. The culmination of this insidious campaign came with Silas's final, and arguably most brilliant, invention, a compact, self-sustaining energy generator. It was a device that promised to revolutionize the world, offering clean, limitless power in a package no larger than a shoebox. It was the embodiment of Innovara Tech's original ethos, a true game changer, capable of empowering communities, eradicating energy poverty, and ushering in a new era of global sustainability. Silas presented it to his board with the enthusiasm of a young prodigy, his eyes alight with the promise of a better future, his voice filled with the passion that had built an empire. But instead of awe, he was met with derision, with a wall of cynical, calculating faces. Cashin openly scoffed, dismissing it as an old man's folly, too complex, too far-fetched for immediate marketability. "Where's the quick profit, Silas?" he'd sneered. "Where's the scalable, immediate return? This is a science project, not a product." Genevieve presented a scathing financial analysis, declaring it a black hole of investment that would bankrupt the company before it saw a single watt of profit. She painted a picture of financial ruin, twisting numbers to make the visionary appear reckless. Bartholomew, perhaps the cruelest of all, publicly mocked Silas's prototype, calling it a child's toy, and whispering behind his hand about Silas's declining mental faculties, even circulating anonymous memos questioning his cognitive abilities. The board, swayed by the triumvirate's relentless campaign, rejected the invention, effectively sealing its fate within Innovara Tech. They ridiculed his outdated vision, scoffed at his crazy invention, and subtly, yet decisively, pushed him out, forcing him into a gracious retirement, a polite dismissal meant to save face while simultaneously stripping him of all power. Silas, a man who had dedicated his life to Innovara Tech, felt a betrayal that cut deeper than any financial loss. It wasn't just his invention they rejected, it was his legacy, his principles, his very soul that they trampled upon. His trust in humanity, particularly in those he had nurtured, shattered into a million pieces. He saw the company he had painstakingly built transforming into a soulless entity driven solely by avarice and short-term gain. The very fabric of Innovara Tech, woven with threads of innovation and integrity, was being torn apart by the very people he had entrusted its future to. For weeks, he wrestled with despair, a quiet rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior. He walked the grounds of his estate, the sprawling gardens he had once shared with his late wife, and felt only emptiness. But Silas Thorne was not one to wallow in despair. His mind, though bruised, remained as sharp as ever, capable of devising plans far more intricate than his adversaries could ever fathom. He watched from the sidelines as the company, under Cashin's helm, began to flounder. Its once stellar reputation was tarnished by cost-cutting measures that compromised quality, by a clear lack of genuine innovation, and by a parade of increasingly frustrated customers. He observed how the employees, once vibrant and motivated, became mere cogs in a profit machine, their morale plummeting, their creative sparks dimmed by the relentless pursuit of the bottom line. He saw the company he loved slowly, agonizingly, dying. The self-sustaining energy generator, the invention they had scorned, was still his. Secretly, under a shroud of anonymity, he began to shop its patent rights. The world, unlike Innovara Tech's myopic board, recognized its profound potential. Calls came from every major conglomerate, from governments, from humanitarian organizations. A rival conglomerate, Global Dynamics, a company known for its long-term vision, ethical practices, and commitment to sustainable technology, saw the generator for what it was, a revolutionary breakthrough. They offered billions for the exclusive patent rights, a sum that stunned the industry, a figure so astronomical it made headlines for weeks, though the seller's identity remained a closely guarded secret. Silas accepted, the transaction shrouded in impenetrable legal complexities, the true seller's identity known only to a handful of trusted advisors and himself. He watched the news reports of the sale with a quiet, grim satisfaction. With billions now at his disposal, a grand, meticulously orchestrated plan began to form in his mind. It wasn't about the money, it was about justice. It was about reclaiming his legacy and purging the rot that had infested his creation. He wanted to see, with his own eyes, the true nature of the company's leadership. He needed to understand the depth of their depravity, to identify who was truly loyal to Innovara Tech's founding principles, and who deserved to be swept away. The idea was audacious, bordering on theatrical, yet perfectly suited to his discerning mind. He would buy back Innovara Tech, a simple task for a man of his newfound wealth, but he would do so covertly. The initial purchase would be through a complex web of shell corporations and blind trusts, ensuring his identity remained hidden until the opportune moment. Then, he would go undercover. He would become Arthur Pendleton, a seemingly frail, elderly former company loyalist, seeking a simple janitorial role. The choice of janitor was deliberate. It would grant him unparalleled access to every corner of the building, allowing him to observe unseen, to listen unheard, to witness the true character of those who now ran his company. He would endure their disdain, listen to their boasts, and search for any glimmer of hope within the corporate labyrinth. Only then, armed with irrefutable proof, would he unveil his true identity, delivering a reckoning that would send shockwaves through the corporate world. The stage was set, the players unwitting. The game was about to begin. The transformation of Silas Thorne into Arthur Pendleton was a masterclass in disguise, a deliberate shedding of one identity to assume another. He spent weeks perfecting the persona. His once commanding gait was altered, adding a subtle tremor to his hands, a slight stoop to his shoulders, as if the weight of years had finally bent him. His usually resonant voice was softened, tinged with a feigned frailty, a gentle rasp that invited dismissal. He dressed in ill-fitting, slightly worn clothes, a stark contrast to his usual bespoke attire, choosing fabrics that blended into the background, colors that would never stand out. He even practiced a slight, almost imperceptible cough, a habit common among the elderly. His resume, meticulously crafted by his legal team, spoke of decades of loyal, humble service within Innovara Tech's early days, a quiet, unremarkable career in various support roles, ending with a quiet, unremarkable retirement and a desire to return for something simple, to keep busy, a yearning for routine in his golden years. It was a tale designed to elicit pity and dismissiveness, precisely what he needed. He became an archetype of the invisible, the easily overlooked. Cashin Blackwood, sitting behind his grand mahogany desk, barely spared Arthur a glance during the perfunctory interview. He was too busy scrolling through his stock portfolio on his tablet, his mind occupied with projections and acquisitions. Another one, are we? He muttered to his perpetually stressed assistant, a young woman named Sarah who seemed to carry the weight of the company on her shoulders. He didn't even bother to look up from his screen. Just put him where he won't be in the way. We need someone to clean up after Bartholomew's experiments. And make sure he doesn't touch anything valuable. Standard low-wage contract, minimal benefits. We're running a tight ship here. Sarah, her face a mask of resignation, nodded curtly, her eyes briefly meeting Arthur's with a flicker of something akin to sympathy before she led him away. Silas, as Arthur, merely offered a meek, almost imperceptible nod, a quiet sense of triumph bubbling beneath his placid exterior. The first test was passed, he was invisible, utterly dismissed. His days as Arthur Pendleton were a carefully orchestrated symphony of humiliation and quiet observation. He pushed his cleaning cart through the gleaming corridors of Innovara Tech, a silent phantom in the background, privy to conversations and interactions no executive would ever consider him worthy of overhearing. He polished the same surfaces countless times, emptied countless wastebaskets, and wiped down the smudges left by hands that would never touch his own in respect. He saw the vibrant colors of the original Innovara Tech logo fading on old posters, replaced by stark, modern designs that emphasized efficiency over creativity. He heard the muffled despair from cubicles, the hushed complaints of employees stretched thin by increased workloads and decreased resources. One afternoon, as he meticulously polished the already gleaming floors of the executive wing, Cashin Blackwood emerged from his office, barking orders into his headset, his voice a grating blend of impatience and self-importance. He nearly collided with Arthur, sidestepping him at the last moment with an exaggerated sigh of annoyance. "Watch it, old man." Cashin snapped, his eyes flashing with irritation, barely pausing his conversation. "Do you want to spill your dirty water all over my new Italian shoes? Some of us have important business to attend to, not just push mops around." He didn't wait for a reply, striding off with an air of absolute superiority, completely oblivious to the legendary mind he had just insulted. Silas, his gaze following the retreating figure, felt a cold, hard satisfaction. Cashin's arrogance was even more pronounced, more ingrained, than he remembered. He was a man utterly devoid of empathy, his world revolving solely around his own ego and acquisitions, a hollow shell of the promising protégé Silas had once believed him to be. The irony of his current state, a caricature of the corporate leader Silas had once aspired to be, was not lost on the true founder. Genevieve Sterling was equally, if not more, contemptuous. One morning, Arthur was tasked with cleaning the executive break room, a space filled with expensive espresso machines and designer furniture, yet often left in disarray by its privileged users. Genevieve entered, holding a stack of financial reports, her face etched with a familiar disdain for anything that didn't directly translate to profit. She saw Arthur carefully wiping down the counter, his movements slow and deliberate. "Pendleton," she began, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, utterly devoid of warmth, "I hope you're using our new cost-saving cleaning solution. We've switched to a cheaper brand. Less effective, yes, but the quarterly numbers look better. Every penny counts, especially when we're trying to trim the fat." She then proceeded to loudly discuss, with an unseen assistant on her phone, plans to cut employee benefits even further, to reduce research budgets for non-essential projects that lacked immediate ROI, and even to outsource the cafeteria staff to improve efficiency and reduce the company's human resource burden. "That old fool Silas," she declared, her voice ringing with scorn, utterly confident in her judgment, "he wanted to invest in human capital and long-term vision. Nonsense. Profits are made by cutting, by consolidating, by being ruthless. The market demands it." Silas, wiping a non-existent smudge from a stainless steel surface, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The company he had built on principles of innovation and employee welfare was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece, by a woman who saw people as mere line items on a balance sheet. The casual cruelty of her words, uttered without a second thought in front of a man she considered utterly insignificant, was a stark testament to her true character. Bartholomew Finch was arguably the most openly hostile, his intellectual insecurity manifesting as aggressive contempt. His R&D lab, a chaotic wonderland of half-finished prototypes and discarded schematics, was often Arthur's last stop of the day. Bartholomew saw Arthur not as a fellow human, but as an extension of his cleaning equipment, an object to be dismissed and ordered around. He would leave impossible messes, knowing Arthur would have to clean them. "Pendleton, you old fossil," Bartholomew barked one evening, tossing a crumpled paper prototype of a new sensor towards Arthur's feet, narrowly missing his shoe. "Clean this mess up. And try not to breathe too heavily, your senile wheezing might disturb my genius." He then launched into a tirade about Silas Thorne, unaware that the target of his scorn was standing mere feet away. That old coot, Silas. Thought he was still relevant with his self-sustaining generator. Ha! I saw the prototypes, mere trifles. Ancient tech wrapped in a delusional dream. Good riddance, I say. Now we can finally focus on real innovation, not some fanciful energy myth. His ideas were holding us back, shackling us to a past that no longer serves our bottom line. He snickered, then turned his back to Arthur, engrossed in his own work, completely confident in his intellectual superiority, already envisioning the patents he would file for his own, less impressive, inventions. Silas, bending to pick up the crumpled paper, felt a surge of cold fury. Bartholomew's arrogance was matched only by his profound lack of understanding. The prototype he had just scorned, a crude imitation of Silas's own, was a testament to his mediocrity. Yet, he believed himself a genius, standing on the shoulders of giants he openly mocked, chipping away at their foundations. The constant demeaning treatment, the casual dismissals, the open disdain, Silas endured it all with a stoic silence, a quiet strength born of immense purpose. He was a ghost in his own kingdom, observing the rot from the inside. He heard their cynical plans to cut corners, exploit employees through reduced benefits and increased workloads, and prioritize short-term profits over genuine innovation. He saw them actively suppressing promising young minds whose ideas didn't fit their narrow, profit-driven agenda. He heard the whispered complaints of loyal, long-serving employees being pushed to their limits, their faces etched with exhaustion and disillusionment. The once vibrant Innovara Tech had become a suffocating mausoleum of its former self, its soul slowly being extinguished, replaced by the sterile hum of spreadsheets and the cold glint of avarice. Yet, amidst this corporate wasteland, a flicker of light emerged, a beacon of kindness that solidified Silas's resolve and refined his ultimate plan. Her name was Alara Vance, a young R&D intern, no older than 24, with bright, inquisitive eyes and an earnest demeanor that seemed out of place in the cynical corporate environment. She worked late, often long after the executives had departed, hunched over her workstation, her mind brimming with ideas, her passion for true innovation still untainted. Their first significant interaction occurred one evening. Arthur was cleaning the communal kitchen on Alara's floor, a space often left in utter disarray by other employees, littered with forgotten coffee cups and food wrappers. Alara entered, carrying a half-eaten sandwich and a tired sigh, her shoulders slumped from a long day. She saw Arthur meticulously scrubbing a stubborn stain from the microwave, his movements slow but thorough. "Oh, Mr. Pendleton," she said, her voice soft and genuinely apologetic, a rare sound in those halls. "You shouldn't have to clean up after everyone's carelessness. They're so thoughtless. Let me help you with that." Before Arthur could decline, she took a clean cloth from the dispenser and began wiping down the adjacent counter, her movements quick and efficient, her expression one of genuine concern. Silas, as Arthur, was momentarily stunned. No one, not a single soul, had ever offered to help him, let alone treated him with such unadulterated respect and genuine concern. He merely grunted, a feigned sign of his elderly humility, his eyes, sharp behind their humble facade, studying her every movement, every subtle nuance of her expression. A warmth, long forgotten, bloomed within his chest. Over the following weeks, these small acts of kindness blossomed into quiet conversations. Alara never spoke down to Arthur. She would often offer him a spare coffee or a piece of fruit from her lunch, always with a kind smile. She would share her frustrations, speaking softly, almost to herself, about the company's shift. "It's just not the same, Mr. Pendleton," she confided one evening, polishing a mug she had just used. "When I joined, I dreamed of working for Innovara Tech, the company that changed the world with its groundbreaking discoveries. Now, it feels like they only care about numbers. My ideas, even the small ones, they just get shelved if they don't promise immediate returns. It's so disheartening. I wish Silas Thorne was still here. They say he was a visionary, that he truly cared about groundbreaking discoveries, not just quick profits. They say he valued people." She sighed, her eyes filled with a quiet despair, the idealism she had arrived with slowly eroding under the corporate grind. Arthur listened, his heart aching for the idealism that was being crushed, for the spark of genius that was being stifled. He would occasionally offer a cryptic word of encouragement, a wise saying cloaked in an old man's simple wisdom, carefully chosen to resonate without revealing too much. "The darkest night," he once mused, his voice gravelly, as he emptied a bin beside her workstation, "often precedes the brightest dawn, young lady. True light cannot be extinguished, merely obscured." Alara would look at him, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, a faint, hopeful smile touching her lips, as if searching for deeper meaning in his seemingly simple words. One day, Alara was visibly upset. Arthur found her in a quiet corner of the R&D lab, hunched over a desk, tears welling in her eyes, a crumpled schematic clutched in her hand. "Mr. Pendleton," she whispered, her voice trembling, broken by a choked sob, "my latest project, a concept for a biodegradable plastic alternative that could revolutionize packaging. Bartholomew Finch called it childish nonsense in front of the whole department. He said it was a waste of resources, unaligned with their strategic objectives, which, I suspect, means it won't make us rich overnight. I poured months into it. I genuinely believed it could make a difference. She held up the detailed schematic, her hand trembling, the intricate diagrams betraying a profound understanding of chemistry and environmental science. Silas looked at the schematic, his eyes quickly processing the complex, yet elegant, design. It was brilliant, truly innovative, exactly the kind of out-of-the-box thinking Innovara Tech was founded upon, the kind of project he would have championed personally. He recognized the spark of his own younger self in Alara, the same drive to innovate for the greater good. A true artist, Arthur mumbled, his voice gravelly, his eyes fixed on the schematic, does not stop painting because a critic lacks vision. They find a new canvas. Alara looked at him, her eyes widening slightly, a flicker of understanding and renewed hope replacing the despair. A new canvas, she repeated, a faint, hopeful smile returning to her face, a fragile seed of resilience blossoming within her. This stark contrast between the ruthless executives, driven by greed and contempt, and the hopeful, honest intern, who treated him with genuine kindness and clung to the company's original principles, solidified Silas's ultimate plan. He had seen enough. The rot was pervasive, but the seeds of integrity still existed in places he least expected, growing resiliently in the shadows. His sweeping corporate overhaul would not merely be an act of revenge, it would be a surgical strike, cleansing the infection and nurturing the genuine talent that remained. The meticulously orchestrated revenge would serve a dual purpose, to punish the wicked and to uplift the worthy. The time for the grand unveiling was fast approaching. He had gathered all the evidence he needed, all the confirmation of their moral bankruptcy. The game was no longer about observation, it was about execution. The quarterly board meeting was always an event of performative self-congratulation for Cashin, Genevieve, and Bartholomew, a carefully choreographed display of their supposed genius. Today was no different. The massive projection screen behind the boardroom table displayed gleaming charts depicting increased profits, reduced overheads, and streamlined operations, all achieved, as Genevieve proudly announced, through aggressive cost-cutting and decisive leadership. She cited figures of increased shareholder value, conveniently omitting any mention of the declining employee morale, the shelved innovative projects, or the increasingly strained client relationships resulting from reduced quality control. Cashin, beaming, delivered a pontificating speech about Innovara Tech's triumphant return to profitability, taking full credit for the short-term gains. The days of fanciful, unprofitable innovations are thankfully behind us, he declared, his chest puffed out. We have successfully purged the inefficiencies of the past and carved a path towards unparalleled growth, a future where every decision is dictated by the bottom line. Bartholomew, for his part, presented a superficial overview of new, market-driven, product lines, which were, in truth, merely rehashed versions of old technologies, devoid of any genuine breakthrough. He subtly mocked Silas's past ventures, eliciting smirks from Cashin and Genevieve, who believed they had erased the founder's legacy entirely. They were reveling in their perceived victory, believing themselves unassailable, the undisputed masters of their domain. Just as the applause began to fade, a sudden, sharp rap echoed on the boardroom doors, jarring and unexpected. Everyone turned, annoyed at the interruption to their self-congratulatory revelry. Who could that be? Cashin muttered, his brow furrowing with irritation. I explicitly told security no interruptions. This is highly unprofessional. Before anyone could respond, the heavy doors swung open once more. And there, standing poised in the entrance, was the man from the earlier encounter, no longer a vague recognition but a figure of commanding presence, radiating an almost palpable aura of power. He was dressed impeccably, his silver hair catching the light from the chandeliers, his eyes, sharp and piercing, surveying the room with an almost surgical precision, taking in the stunned faces of the executives. He stepped in, his stride confident and deliberate, followed by the two impassive lawyers, their briefcases still clutched firmly, their expressions unreadable. Cashin's smug expression faltered, a ripple of unease crossing his face. You again? I thought I made it clear this was a private meeting. Security. Where is security? He fumbled for his phone, his irritation quickly turning to a nascent unease, a cold premonition beginning to prickle at the edges of his carefully constructed composure. The man merely smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that held 1,000 unspoken meanings, a chilling prelude to the storm about to break. Security won't be joining us, Cashin. They report to me now. He walked further into the room, his stride confident, stopping at the head of the table, directly opposite Cashin, placing himself in the rightful position of authority. The air in the room grew thick with an unspoken tension, an oppressive silence that pressed down on the executives. Genevieve Sterling, ever practical, ever analytical, narrowed her eyes, trying to compute the impossible. Who exactly are you, sir? And by what authority do you claim such things? Her voice, usually so composed, so devoid of emotion, held a tremor of uncertainty, a crack in her steely facade. The man's gaze fixed upon her, a hint of steel in his eyes. By the authority of ownership, Miss Sterling. My name is Silas Thorne. A collective gasp ripped through the boardroom, a strangled sound of pure shock. Cashin's face drained of all color, turning a sickly white, his jaw dropping so low it seemed to defy gravity. Genevieve's eyes, usually so calculating and emotionless, widened in utter disbelief, her hands trembling as they clutched her financial reports, the papers rustling like autumn leaves in a sudden gust of wind. Bartholomew Finch, who had been about to make another snide remark about Silas's obsolete vision, choked on his own words, his face contorting in a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. The name, Silas Thorne, hung in the air like a thunderclap, shattering their illusion of control, their carefully constructed reality crumbling around them. Silas Thorne? Cashin stammered, his voice barely a whisper, hoarse with disbelief. But that's impossible. You retired. You sold your shares. You're an old man, you're not even on the board anymore. His mind raced frantically, desperate to find an explanation, a loophole, anything to counter the impossible reality unfolding before his eyes. It was a nightmare come to life, a ghost from the past returned to haunt them. Silas, enjoying their discomfiture, allowed a small, triumphant smile to play on his lips, a subtle curving that bespoke absolute victory. Indeed, I retired. And I did sell my shares. But what you failed to realize, Cashin, is that when I sold the patent rights to my final invention, the self-sustaining energy generator you so foolishly rejected, for billions, I didn't simply disappear. I invested those billions, meticulously, patiently. And then, quietly, through a labyrinth of trusts and shell corporations, through countless anonymous transactions, I bought back every single share of Innovara Tech. From the smallest investor to the largest hedge fund, every last piece of this company now belongs to me, registered under my name once more. He gestured to one of his lawyers, a formidable woman with an air of quiet efficiency, who stepped forward and placed a thick stack of documents, bound in crisp, official red folders, on the polished table. The papers landed with a decisive thud. These, Silas continued, his voice resonating with unassailable authority, echoing through the stunned silence, are the official documents confirming my 100% ownership of Innovara Tech, effective as of this morning. You, Cashin, Genevieve, Bartholomew, and the rest of this board, are merely temporary occupants of seats that are now, once again, mine to bestow or to revoke. The executives stared at the documents, their eyes darting from the official seals to Silas's unwavering gaze, then back to the irrefutable evidence. Their faces were a mask of dawning, gut-wrenching horror. It was impossible, yet undeniably real. The old man they had ridiculed, the visionary they had cast aside, had returned not as a ghost, but as the absolute master, wielding power they could only dream of. But why? Genevieve finally managed to croak, her voice hoarse with shock, her usual composure completely shattered. Why would you, after all these years? Why now, when we've brought the company back to profitability? Her arguments sounded hollow even to her own ears. Silas's eyes, previously laced with amusement, hardened, glinting with a cold, unwavering resolve. Because, Miss Sterling, I needed to see for myself the depths to which you had sunk. I needed to witness, firsthand, the complete erosion of everything I built this company on. I needed to know the true measure of your greed, your cruelty, your utter lack of vision. I needed to understand the extent of the rot. And for that, I had to be close. Very close. He paused, letting the full weight of his words sink in, allowing the cold dread to seep into their very bones. Then, he delivered the final, crushing blow, the piece of information that would truly shatter their world. You remember Arthur Pendleton, don't you? The frail, elderly janitor you all delighted in demeaning? The one you casually dismissed as a senile old fool, too insignificant to notice? The one who cleaned up your messes, literal and metaphorical, day after day, while you openly gloated about destroying my legacy and enriching yourselves? Cassian, Genevieve, and Bartholomew exchanged horrified glances, their eyes widening in unison as a cold, sickening dread washed over them. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity, each revelation a hammer blow to their self-important facades. The realization hit them with the force of a physical impact. The janitor, the invisible old man they had treated with such contempt, was Silas Thorne. Their faces, already pale with shock, turned ashen, contorted in a grotesque tableau of pure terror and absolute humiliation. The sheer, audacious irony of it all was almost too much to bear. Yes, Silas said, his voice chillingly calm, filling the suffocating silence. Arthur Pendleton was my final, most crucial experiment. And you, my dear executives, failed that experiment spectacularly. You proved yourselves to be precisely the soulless, myopic, rapacious individuals I suspected you were. You mocked my vision, you scorned my invention, and you spat upon the very principles that built this empire. You valued profit over people, and greed over genius. And for that, there will be a reckoning. He paused once more, letting the full weight of his words sink in, observing their unraveling. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the rapid, shallow breathing of the now terrified executives. Their masks were off, and the true game, the game of justice, had just begun. The immediate aftermath of Silas's revelation was a whirlwind of shock, disbelief, and utter panic, each executive reacting according to their core nature. Cassian Blackwood, his face a grotesque mask of fear and fury, his eyes darting wildly, lunged forward, not at Silas, but at the stack of documents, as if he could physically shred the truth. This is insane. You can't do this. I'm the CEO. I have contracts. His voice was a desperate, high-pitched whine, laced with the frantic desperation of a cornered animal. This is slander. I'll sue. I'll destroy you. Silas merely raised a hand, a gesture of quiet command, and one of his lawyers, a man with an equally calm but firm demeanor, stepped forward, placing a thick, red folder on the table, its contents clearly labeled Termination and Legal Proceedings. Mr. Blackwood, the lawyer stated calmly, his voice cutting through Cassian's increasingly incoherent protests, your employment contract, like those of Ms. Sterling and Mr. Finch, contains explicit clauses regarding company acquisition and change of ownership, specifically granting the new owner the right to terminate employment. As the sole owner, Mr. Thorne has the absolute right to terminate your employment, effective immediately, without cause, under the terms of the golden parachute you so meticulously crafted for yourselves. However, given the overwhelming evidence of your gross mismanagement, the deliberate suppression of company innovation, particularly Mr. Thorne's groundbreaking energy generator, and the documented financial malfeasance, we will be pursuing aggressive legal action to reclaim all bonuses and severance packages paid out during your entire tenure, citing breach of fiduciary duty and corporate malfeasance. Rest assured, your golden parachutes have not only been shredded, they will be used as evidence against you. Cassian stumbled back, as if physically struck, his face contorting in abject horror. The words, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate malfeasance hung in the air like a death knell, signaling the absolute end of his career and reputation, a public downfall that would follow him for the rest of his life. His carefully constructed empire of deceit, built on a foundation of stolen dreams and crushed innovation, was crumbling before his eyes, reduced to dust. He tried to speak, but no coherent words emerged, only a guttural sound of despair, a raw cry of a man whose world had just ended. Genevieve Sterling, ever the pragmatist, immediately switched tactics from defiance to desperate plea, her voice suddenly soft, unctuous, bordering on tears. "Silas, please. Think of my family. I've dedicated years to this company. My decisions, they were always for the company's financial health, I swear. Every cut, every consolidation, was for the greater good of Innovara Tech." Her eyes, once sharp and calculating, were now wide with a raw, desperate fear, glistening with unshed tears. She saw not just her job, but her entire carefully cultivated financial life, her meticulously built social standing, collapsing into a heap of public scandal. Silas's gaze was cold, unyielding, his face etched with a profound disappointment that was far more devastating than anger. "Your financial health was at the expense of integrity, Ms. Sterling. I heard you gloating about cutting employee benefits, about sacrificing long-term research for short-term gains, about reducing human beings to mere numbers on a spreadsheet. I heard you dismiss my life's work as unviable. You saw people as numbers, and innovation as a liability. You sowed the seeds of greed, and now you will reap the bitter harvest. Your dedication was to your own enrichment, not to the soul of this company." He turned to his lawyer. "Ms. Sterling's access to all company systems is to be revoked immediately. Her office is to be cleared by end of day, with a full audit of all personal and corporate assets. Security will escort her out." Genevieve let out a choked sob, a sound of utter defeat, the image of her perfect life shattering into 1,000 irreparable pieces. She knew the implications. Not only was she fired, but the public scandal, the legal battles, and the taint of corporate malfeasance and betrayal would ensure no other reputable company would ever hire her. Her name, once synonymous with financial prowess, would now be synonymous with ruin. She was not just losing her job, she was losing her identity, her future, and her meticulously built facade of success. Bartholomew Finch, pale and trembling, tried a different approach, attempting to reassert his intellectual superiority even in the face of absolute defeat, a desperate clinging to his last shred of perceived dignity. "Silas, surely you understand. My criticisms were constructive. I was merely trying to guide Innovara Tech towards a more modern approach. Your generator, it was simply outdated. I can fix it. I can make it marketable. We can collaborate, Silas. Imagine what we could achieve." He babbled, trying to sound intelligent, but his voice cracked with fear, his usual eloquent jargon dissolving into pathetic pleas. Silas looked at him with an expression of profound disappointment, a quiet sadness for the wasted potential. "Bartholomew, you mocked my prototype, spread insidious rumors about my mental state, and systematically stifled true innovation within R&D. You called Alara Vance's brilliant biodegradable plastic alternative childish nonsense, because it didn't promise instant riches. You are not a guide, Bartholomew, you are a parasite, feeding off the genius of others while claiming it as your own. You have no vision, no integrity, and no place in the Innovara Tech of the future. Your modern approach was simply a justification for your mediocrity." He nodded to his other lawyer. "Mr. Finch is to be escorted out and his lab access revoked immediately. Any attempts to access company data or intellectual property will be met with immediate legal action. His research will be thoroughly reviewed for any intellectual property theft." Bartholomew's face crumpled. He envisioned his carefully curated professional reputation, his academic papers, his innovative projects, all collapsing into a heap of public scorn and ridicule. The man who prided himself on his intellect, his superior mind, was now exposed as a fraud, his career, like his ego, utterly destroyed. He stood there, trembling, reduced to a pathetic figure, utterly stripped of his pretense, a shell of the arrogant man he had been moments before. The executives, now stripped of their power and their pride, were promptly escorted out of the building by Silas's newly assigned security detail, their pleas and protests falling on deaf ears, their desperate attempts to cling to power met with cold, unyielding efficiency. Their fall was swift and absolute, a stark testament to the unforgiving hand of justice when wielded by a man who had been wronged so profoundly. Their names, once whispered with envy and respect in corporate circles, would now be spoken with disdain and mockery. They had lost everything, not just their jobs, but their reputations, their carefully built lives, and any semblance of a future in the industry they had once dominated. As the commotion subsided, Silas turned, his gaze sweeping over the remaining, stunned board members, some of whom looked equally shocked, others simply relieved that they had not been caught in the crossfire. His eyes then found a figure standing quietly by the door, wide-eyed and trembling, having witnessed the entire, breathtaking drama unfold. It was Alara Vance, the young intern. She had been called into the boardroom by a frantic assistant moments before the reveal, expecting a routine, perhaps even intimidating, meeting. She now stood there, utterly dumbfounded, her mouth slightly agape, her mind struggling to process the impossible. "Alara," Silas said, his voice softening considerably, a gentle warmth replacing the cold steel from moments before, a profound kindness radiating from him. Alara flinched, startled to be addressed directly by the man who had just dismantled an entire corporate structure and revealed himself as the legendary founder. She had only known him as Arthur, the kind, unassuming janitor. Her mind struggled to reconcile the two images, the humble old man and the formidable titan. "Come here, child," Silas beckoned gently, a grandfatherly warmth in his tone. Alara, still in a daze, her legs feeling like lead, slowly walked towards him, her eyes wide with apprehension and awe. "You treated Arthur Pendleton with kindness and respect," Silas began, his eyes holding a profound gratitude, a recognition of her innate goodness. "You shared your genuine ideas, ideas that others, those who just departed, dismissed. You lamented the loss of Innovara Tech's soul, even when it meant risking your own standing, risking the ire of those in power. You, Alara, are a rare beacon of integrity and true innovation in a world full of cynical opportunists. You are what Innovara Tech was always meant to be, the embodiment of its purest spirit." Alara's eyes welled up with tears, a complex mix of shock, overwhelming relief, and profound emotion. She still couldn't quite grasp the magnitude of the moment, the surreal nature of the shift. Silas smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "Alara Vance," he announced to the stunned board, his voice ringing with renewed purpose, a clear declaration of a new era, "you are hereby appointed the head of research and development for Innovara Tech, effective immediately. And your project, the biodegradable plastic alternative, the one Bartholomew so crudely dismissed, will be our first priority. You will have a blank check, a dedicated team, and my full support to bring it to fruition. Innovara Tech will return to its roots, its true purpose, and you, Alara, will be instrumental in leading that charge, in shaping its ethical future." Alara's breath hitched in her throat. Head of R&D? A blank check for her project? It was beyond her wildest dreams, a promotion of such staggering magnitude it felt utterly surreal, a fantasy brought to life. She had expected to be fired, or at best, ignored and discouraged. Instead, she was being offered a kingdom, a chance to fulfill her deepest aspirations, to make a real difference in the world. Tears streamed down her face, tears of overwhelming gratitude, disbelief, and a burgeoning sense of responsibility. She had treated a humble janitor with respect, and in return, she had been given a future beyond anything she could have imagined, a testament to the unexpected rewards of genuine kindness. The contrast between her unexpected reward and the swift, brutal punishment of the antagonists was a vivid demonstration of Silas's profound and unwavering sense of justice, a clear message that integrity would finally be rewarded. Months passed, and the echoes of Silas Thorne's dramatic return reverberated throughout the corporate world, a story that became the stuff of legend. The tale of Silas the Sage, reclaiming his empire and purging the corrupt leadership, became a legend whispered in boardrooms and celebrated in break rooms, a powerful narrative of justice served. Innovara Tech, under Silas's renewed, active leadership and Alara Vance's burgeoning genius, underwent a radical transformation. The company, once a hollow shell driven by avarice, now pulsed with a renewed spirit of innovation and ethical practice, its heart beating strongly once more. Silas, no longer a recluse, actively guided Alara, mentoring her, sharing his vast knowledge and unwavering vision for a technology-driven future for the betterment of humanity. He restored employee benefits, ensuring fair wages and a supportive work environment. He reinstituted robust funding for long-term, groundbreaking research, re-establishing the once-stifled culture of curiosity and bold experimentation. The atmosphere within Innovara Tech shifted from one of stifling fear and cutthroat competition to one of vibrant creativity, collaboration, and mutual respect. Employee morale soared, and truly innovative projects, once suppressed by the profit-driven executives, began to flourish, attracting top talent from around the globe. Alara's biodegradable plastic alternative, once dismissed as childish nonsense, was on track to revolutionize multiple industries, attracting global attention and restoring Innovara Tech's reputation as a true pioneer, a company that once again put progress before profit. Alara, now confident and empowered, proved to be an exceptional leader, balancing her idealism with practical acumen, growing into the role with grace and wisdom. She never forgot the kindness shown to Arthur Pendleton and carried that empathy into her leadership, treating every employee with the respect she herself had shown, fostering an environment where every voice mattered. She represented the bright future of Innovara Tech, a future built on integrity, vision, and genuine human connection, a living testament to Silas's renewed principles. Silas, observing the vibrant energy returning to his company, the creative hum that once defined it, felt a profound sense of peace. His meticulous plan had succeeded, not just in punishing the wicked, but in elevating the worthy, in rebuilding something greater from the ashes of betrayal. He had witnessed the darkest aspects of human nature, the insidious creep of greed and contempt, but he had also found a rare beacon of purity and promise in Alara Vance. He had proven that true leadership wasn't about ruthless efficiency or short-term profits, but about vision, integrity, and the unwavering belief in people. His legacy was now secure, not in a building or a balance sheet, but in the renewed spirit of Innovara Tech itself. The fallen executives, Cashin, Genevieve, and Bartholomew, faced their own grim realities. Stripped of their wealth, their reputations in tatters, and their careers utterly destroyed, they became cautionary tales in the cutthroat world of corporate finance. Cashin faced multiple lawsuits, his once glowing resume now a red flag. Genevieve's name became a byword for corporate greed, unable to find employment even in the most obscure corners of the financial world. Bartholomew's intellectual arrogance crumbled under the weight of public ridicule, his genius exposed as mere plagiarism and petty sabotage. They learned, in the harshest possible way, that the foundations of success, when built upon deceit and disrespect, are inherently unstable and destined to crumble, leaving behind only the rubble of their hubris. In the end, this extraordinary tale of justice and redemption served as a powerful reminder: true character is often revealed not in the spotlight of success, but in the shadows of adversity. Kindness, integrity, and genuine vision, though they may seem insignificant in the face of overwhelming greed, possess a quiet power that can, in time, move mountains and reshape destinies. For while the wicked may prosper for a season, it is the good heart, unwavering in its principles, that truly reaps the lasting rewards, proving that every act of decency, no matter how small, casts a ripple that eventually finds its way back, often in ways one could never have imagined. If you were captivated by Silas Thorne's journey of betrayal, disguise, and ultimate triumph, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We bring you compelling true stories and dramatic narratives of justice, revenge, and unexpected revelations every week. Don't miss out on our next tale. And now, we want to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in Silas's meticulously crafted plan? Did you find yourself cheering when he finally revealed his true identity to Cassian, Genevieve, and Bartholomew? Have you ever witnessed someone like these arrogant executives get their well-deserved comeuppance? Share your thoughts, reactions, and personal stories in the comments section below. We love reading your insights.